Hey, everybody out there in podcast land, how are you doing 2 days before Christmas? Here's my present to you, the latest episode of The Fortress of Rock with me, the Maestro, Kevin Crane, episode 71. As I mentioned, taping here Friday evening, December the 23rd, 2022. Hope you guys all have a safe, fun, happy Christmas. Weather is not nice. Dare I say, the weather outside is frightful. It's not the disaster, at least where I am, that was predicted. It's cold, very, very cold, but not feet of snow, not anything that we here in the Midwest cannot handle. So, that being said, let's look at the news of the world in rock and roll. Of course, news of the world, our tribute to Freddie Mercury and Queen. And let's start off with some holiday giving. Metallica, last Friday night, December the 16th, had their third Helping Hands fundraising concert out in Los Angeles. Now, of course, we've talked about the fact they've got new music coming. In April of 2023, 72 Seasons, the new album, the new single, Lux Eterna, which they did play at this fundraising concert, of course. A great, great cause for Metallica's charity, All Within My Hands. If you have Paramount Plus, you can get on there right now and stream the full concert. I know Greta Van Fleet opened the show for them. I'm not sure if they're included in the Paramount Plus streaming or not. Couple of interesting acoustic covers. They did a 5-song acoustic set during this concert, including UFO and Thin Lizzy. And Thin Lizzy was Borderline, not Whiskey in the Jar. Always good to see the bands, the fans, the performers in rock and roll come together doing good, because God only knows we need some good in this world right now. So kudos to Metallica. Check out the Helping Hands fundraiser concert on Paramount Plus. Now, somebody else who likes to keep busy in the rock world this time of year is, of course, Dave Grohl. Dave Grohl, of course, he keeps busy all the time. It's what I love about Dave Grohl. You can't keep this man down. He has that 70s, 80s rock mentality. Of course, back in the day, it was concert tour, concert tour, concert tour. We got albums from the favorite bands and our favorite performers of the era. Each and every year, it seemed like. And of course, now, because music, as Gene Simmons says, new music is devalued, because none of us have to pay for it anymore if we choose not to. I, of course, do. Many reasons why. Of course, I'm an old school guy. I do believe in rewarding the artists for putting out the effort, for trying to be creative and keep us engaged in the world of music. And also, I'd like to have music in my car without having to plug my phone into it and go through all that. I still prefer to just slam a CD into my player in my car But Dave Grohl, again, one of the few, the proud, that still has this keep working mentality when it comes to rock and roll. Miles Kennedy is another one. But Dave Grohl this time of year loves to do the Hanukkah sessions with his friend Greg Kurstin. They started this back in 2020. Now, the Hanukkah sessions for this year, 2022, this is the first time they ever recorded in front of a live audience. And basically what the Hanukkah sessions are, it's just about having fun. It's just about bringing in some rock and roll friends, guest stars, doing a lot of cover songs. They release one song every day, my understanding is, during Hanukkah. Now, of course, like I said, they recorded this year's rendition of the Hanukkah sessions in front of a live audience. So they're basically chopping up that performance day by day. A mixed bag, a very eclectic mix of covers this year so far. Again, as I tape here on Friday night, December the 23rd, they've released 5 chapters, songs from the Hanukkah sessions. They've been doing covers of Janis Ian so far, 10cc, Pink, Blood, Sweat, and Tears, and Beck. Again, like I said, a very interesting mix of old and new. Dave Grohl brought his daughter in to sing for the Janis Ian cover here, I think it was a day or two ago as we tape. I know Beck's collaboration was the most recent one, again, as we tape. So if you want to have some fun, check out the Hanukkah sessions on YouTube. You guys know I'm not a big fan of Beck. I could really care less about Pink. I know they're well respected, and that's fine. I prefer the older stuff, the 10cc cover, the Things We Do for Love, Blood, Sweat, and Tears, of course, and then even the Janis Ian cover is a little bit intriguing to me, again, because it's old school. But again, check that out on YouTube. Even if you want to, go back. If you love Dave Grohl like I do, go back, check out the previous couple years of the Hanukkah sessions. Just fun stuff. And again, it's a testament to Dave Grohl, how much he loves rock and roll, how much he loves music, the energy he has. Because remember, the Foo Fighters lost Taylor Hawkins recently. And Dave Grohl still, he's got to be out there. He's got to be performing. Of course, I'm assuming it's cathartic for him. But he just won't sit still, and God bless him for it. It's fantastic. I personally think we need more of it in the world of music. Again, like I said, I wish it was more like it was in the 70s and the 80s, where I wish these artists were making more money off their music. I really do. Streaming services have kind of killed the studio album. And again, we've talked about Gene Simmons mentioning this. When you can go on Spotify or Apple or any streaming service and listen to this music, Amazon, as part of a base subscription, or even like with Spotify, free with ads. The amount of money going back to the performer, the band, is minimal, and that's why they have no incentive monetarily to record new music. Now, I've said it many times on this podcast in the past. I still think if you're a creative person, like Dave Grohl still does, like Miles Kennedy of Alter Bridge and the Conspirators still does, if you're creative, that drive should be in you to make music, regardless of profit. And unfortunately, it seems like a lot of the artists out there, Gene Simmons obviously is one of them, who's come out and said it. I'm sure there's a lot of other ones who won't say it but feel the same way. If I'm not making maximum profit, maximum revenue on my work, why should I bother? I'll just live off my laurels. I'll live off the past. Of course, what would a Fortress of Rock weekly news update be if we didn't have more Journey drama? Yes, they are still fighting in the Journey camp. It seems to get worse each and every week. There are still statements coming out from Journey saying that they plan on touring together in 2023, and their next tour starts very, very soon in calendar year 2023. I believe it's either January or February. They're supposed to start on their next tour. And I don't see how this happens. How this happens with Neil Schon and Jonathan Cain on the same stage. We talked about the rumors that Neil Schon put out there when all this infighting was heating up about bringing Greg Rowley back. Maybe that's the solution. But now, the latest news. Neil Schon files a cease and desist order on his bandmate Jonathan Cain because Jonathan Cain was at a Donald Trump event at Mar-a-Lago and played Don't Stop Believin' with a bunch of politicians singing the lyrics. And of course, the name calling starts up as Neil Schon calls Jonathan Cain a hypocrite because he pulled out a snippet of an interview that they both did together years in the past, where they basically both agreed that Journey doesn't get into politics. And then, of course, Jonathan Cain fires back, talking about how Neil Schon, again, is destroying the finances of the band because of his extravagant spending with his wife. And on it goes. Personally, I wish all entertainers, music, movie, TV, actors, actresses, rock stars would stay the hell out of politics. I really believe it. And I can't stand, you guys know I've brought up countless examples of rock stars on this podcast who are sticking their noses into business that they aren't qualified to talk about. Most recently, I ranted on Neil Young, mad at factory farms, not understanding the complexities of what it takes to feed the people in this world. Throwing a hissy fit because, yeah, I get it. None of us want to know how the sausage is made. It is a cruel process, an awful process. But in the end, we have got to feed our children. We've got to feed ourselves. And when you are a hippie like Neil Young is, and you just want to hold hands and say kumbaya and hope that whatever deity you pray for or you pray to is going to give you the sustenance you need to get through the day, you're just out of touch. Life stinks. There's war. There's plague. There's pestilence. And in the end, we need to eat. And sometimes the process of getting that food, that meat that we need and our kids need, is ugly and nasty. There are rules in play, for the most part, that work to make sure the food we eat is clean, healthy, and safe. But again, the process of getting that food to us outside of those parameters can be ugly and cruel. I digress. Going back to Journey, it's a tricky situation because I understand both sides. In the end, I guess it boils down to who is Journey. Is it Neil Schon? Is it Jonathan Cain? Is it both of them? Now, technically, in my eyes, Neil Schon has more of a case to the Journey name, to the Journey legacy than Jonathan Cain, because Jonathan Cain, although he was part of Journey during their huge years in the 80s, Escape, of course, to me, their biggest album. But of course, Jonathan Cain was with the band all through those years up to this day. Now, how much weight does that carry when Neil Schon is the one stable founding member of Journey? I don't know what legal documentation there is. It sounds to me like they're partners in Journey, so that's going to complicate things. But in the end, I understand where Neil Schon is coming from, in that he doesn't want Journey to be connected to politics. I understand Jonathan Cain for wanting to get involved and try to support the candidate he likes, that he respects, or he wants people to vote for. But is it right for him to use Journey's songs? Is it right for any politician to use any popular song without the permission of the artist or the performer? It gets petty. It gets vindictive. I just wish we could keep politics completely and totally out of music and movies and TV and streaming, and just do what you do best. You play rock and roll, you act, you perform, you sing. You don't all have political science degrees. You all are experts in the fields that you claim to be. I don't think Leonardo DiCaprio has an environmental science degree. Robert De Niro doesn't have a master's in political science. That's where I really have problems. Your personal wants, needs, desires versus what you are actually qualified to speak on. So again, this whole mess with Journey now is taking on another level of ridiculousness. Just keep politics out of it altogether. I don't care if it's Democrat. I don't care if it's Republican. Keep politics out of it. A couple passings in the world of rock and roll here over the last week or two. Of course, the Tubes, one of those bands that kind of flew under the radar for a long time until MTV in the 80s found them and propped them up and gave them most of the success, financial, commercial success that they enjoyed through their videos. Of course, She's a Beauty, Talk to You Later, very good stuff. co-founder of the Tubes, bass player Rick Anderson, passed away here within the last week or so. Thoughts and prayers to his family and friends. And then going back a little bit further, Hall of Famers, Rock and Roll Hall of Famers, the Rascals, or the Young Rascals. Their drummer, Dino Danelli, passed away here within the last few weeks. So, as always, we bow our heads, moment of silence for the great rock and rollers who have left us. All right, even though there's not a lot of new music right now, during the holidays, you rarely, if ever, see new music come out. We're looking at February for the next wave of new music. But at least we've got some new music news. Now, of course, REM has not been active for quite a while. They called it quits at least a decade ago. But their lead singer, Michael Stipe, has said he is going to put out his first solo album ever sometime in 2023. Now, I don't know what to expect from that. Kind of worries me a little bit. Most of the time when the lead singer of a popular band goes off on his or her own, the results are usually underwhelming. I look at somebody like Steve Perry of Journey. I mean, David Lee Roth might be the exception to the rule. At least David Lee Roth had a somewhat decent run as a solo artist. Of course, Eat 'Em and Smile is a great album. So is Skyscraper. After that, things kind of tailed off a bit. You could even look at somebody like Sully Erna from Godsmack. One of the reasons why, even though, again, politically I don't line up with him, but one of the reasons I respect and admire Bono of U2, you notice he has never, ever ventured out solo. That band has stayed together and stayed stable for decades upon decades upon decades. And I think Bono knows the collective, the group, is always going to be better than the sum of its individual parts. If you guys can come up with an example of somebody who did better than their original band as a solo artist, hit me up on our Facebook page and let me know. And please don't go for the two people that you know I don't like. Don't mention Eric Clapton and don't mention Neil Young. I don't want to hear it. Come up with somebody else. I'm more than willing to concede if I'm wrong, but I don't like Eric Clapton and I don't like Neil Young, so I don't want to hear about how great they are and how much of a success story they were away from the bands that they came from. Because they stink. And their bands weren't all that good to begin with. Sorry. Then finally, a little bit of a rock and roll Christmas present for me, for all the Van Halen fans out there. Wolfgang Van Halen just came out this past week and said that he is almost done with the second studio album from Mammoth WVH. He says it will be finished and completed before he hits the road with his band on a long, extensive series of tours, starting off with Alter Bridge, which I will be seeing in February in Indianapolis. And then, of course, he jumps on to the Metallica World Tour. So I think Wolfgang knows they've got to get this done. He's got to get this done before January ends and before he has to go back out on the road. Otherwise, he's not going to have any time to complete it because he is going to be touring basically for almost 2 years straight. Now, of course, as opposed to the touring band, Mammoth WVH, and Wolfgang has said this himself. I'm not a Nine Inch Nails fan, but I understand the analogy he makes when he says Nine Inch Nails is Trent Reznor in the studio. Trent Reznor does everything when it comes to constructing the Nine Inch Nails albums. But then they go out on tour. He, of course, has his band that he brings with him, people he trusts, that he knows. It's almost like two separate entities. And that's the same thing Wolfgang is doing with Mammoth WVH. Wolfgang does everything in the studio. So this is all on him. He plays all the instruments. He does pretty much everything. So this is all on him. Once the holidays are done, he can get away from his family and his obligations and have 2 or 3 weeks to finish up the second Mammoth WVH album. He's got to do it all on his own. The pressures of being a rock and roll star. Who would want that? Who would want that? At least look at it this way. Down the road, 10, 15, 20, 25 years, hopefully, he's still making music under the Mammoth banner. He's not going to have to deal with lawsuits and cease and desist orders from bandmates because it's all on him. So in that sense, it's got to be a little bit relieving, a little bit of a great feeling. Takes a weight off his shoulders to know that it is all on him, but the success is all on him. Yes, and the failure is too. But he doesn't have to have any infighting or any kind of legal proceedings jumping up on him down the road based on a bitter ex-bandmate. All right, that's going to do it for News of the World. Next up, of course, is Breakdown. A little bit of Christmas music for you this week, of course, to get you into the holiday spirit here, just 2 days before Christmas. Also, in terms of new songs, we talked last week about Ugly Kid Joe, and they had that great rock tribute song on their latest album, Rad Wings of Destiny. The song was Dead Friends Play. Well, we've got another song that looks back at the greatest era of rock and roll. This one, of course, from Steel Panther. So hang out with me through a quick promo break, and I'll be right back. I am the Maestro on the Fortress of Rock. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Fortress of Rock podcast with me, the Maestro, Kevin Crane. Of course, that was segment 1, the news of the world, our tribute to Freddie Mercury and Queen, where we look back at the past week in rock and roll and all the news and all the controversies that you deserve to know about. Next up is the heart of the show, the meat and potatoes, Breakdown, where we are going to review all the new songs, all the new albums, all the new concert tours, the shows that I've seen personally. Stay tuned for that. Of course, we're now available on Spotify, Anchor, Apple, Stitcher, Castbox, Google, Pocket Cast, and Radio Public, wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Hang out, kids. We'll be right back. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Fortress of Rock, episode 71, December the 23rd, 2022. Can't say it enough. I hope you and your family and your loved ones and your friends all have safe, happy holidays through Christmas and New Year's. Let's do some Christmas music. I've kind of gotten to the point in my life where I'm not a huge Christmas guy. I don't put lights up on my house. This is the first year where my daughter will not be home for Christmas, so I basically said, screw the tree too. And that's okay. It doesn't bother me. It doesn't make me sad. I mean, my daughter not being here makes me sad, but all the lights and the ornaments and the tinsel, I don't need that to enjoy the holiday season. I'm more happy with the fact that there's NFL football on all day Saturday and Sunday. Yeah. Not stuck watching the NBA or not watching the NBA. But anyway, I've kind of gotten into the habit of allowing myself to find one new Christmas album every year to get into, to listen to, whether I can go back to the Rat Pack Christmas. I can look at the Big 80s Christmas album, which is probably the best, which of course features stuff from Billy Squier and the Pretenders and the Waitresses, just the best 80s Christmas album of all time. But somebody who's put out one Christmas album already in the past that I loved and now has come out with his second Christmas album is Chris Isaak. And I think Chris Isaak is so vastly underappreciated in the world of rock and roll. It's ridiculous. He had his one huge hit, Wicked Game, which is an unbelievably fantastic song, but it's not really indicative of who Chris Isaak is. He's a little more fun than that, a little more rockabilly. Sometimes it seems like he's channeling Elvis Presley. If you've ever seen him in concert, I was lucky enough to see him once. Didn't get through the whole concert, unfortunately. I was with somebody who got ill during the show, and we had to leave about 2/3 of the way through, but he is funny. He is funny as hell. It's hard to find the show, believe it or not, in this day and age of streaming and all these different content providers. There are some shows that fall through the cracks that you cannot find anymore. And I wish, if you guys know where I can find it, hit me up on Facebook. Chris Isaak had a show on Showtime way, way back. I believe it was the late 80s or the early 90s. It was simply called The Chris Isaak Show, where he and his backing band, it was almost like a sitcom. I believe it ran for 2 seasons on Showtime. I could be mistaken. Maybe it only got through 1. And believe it or not, I have some old VHS tapes where I actually taped a lot of the episodes. But of course, we all know VHS tapes are not reliable, poor picture quality. I don't even know if my VHS player works anymore. But again, Chris Isaak gets it. Chris Isaak is one of those performers, one of those rock stars that gets it. He gets the humor, the irony of being a rock star. He has fun with it. He goofs on it. In a way, he almost treats his performances like a stand-up comedy act. Now, we're not talking about going as far as somebody like Steel Panther, who we'll get to in a minute. But it seems like Chris Isaak has one of the better hearts in rock and roll. It seems like his heart is in the right place. And that's probably why he does Christmas albums. Like I said, he's put out one in the past, which I really loved, including his cover of Manokaliki Maka, the Hawaiian Christmas song, which is just the coolest thing ever. His cover of that song is awesome. And it's still to this day, one of my favorite Christmas songs of all time. And now he comes back this year, 2022, with Everybody Knows It's Christmas. 13 tracks, 8 originals, 5 classic Christmas songs. So as always here on The Fortress, let us go through track by track. Now we'll start off with a couple standards. Track 1 is Winter Wonderland. And Chris does a great job with this. Does a very good job with track 2, of course, Jingle Bell Rock. Now here's where I initially started to worry a little bit, because the first of his original Christmas compositions comes in at track 3, Holiday Blues. I wasn't the biggest fan of this one. Little trepidation. Starting to wonder, has he lost it? Has he gone too far by trying to do a second Christmas album? Then we get another standard. Run, Rudolph, Run. Very good job with that. Now again, here I'm still looking for the new stuff. Yes, it's great. All the Christmas classics are fine and dandy. But the main reason I wanted to check this album out is because I'd heard there were so many original Christmas songs from him on this. So now we've knocked out 3 of the 5 classics. So most of the stuff coming from this point is going to be his originals. So track 5 is I Believe in Santa Claus, which finally you're starting to fulfill the promise here. And he's got a great little segment in here where he sounds like he is channeling Dean Martin, where he's going, ba 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 ba. And I'm just like, this is what I wanted. This is Chris Isaak having fun, letting us in on the joke, paying homage to the greats. As I said, it's hard not to compare him to Elvis Presley. And I don't mean that in any way, shape, or form to upset Elvis Presley fanatics. And then we get a decent rendition on track 6 of Rockin' Around the Christmas Tree. Track 7, another original, Everybody Knows It's Christmas, the title track for the album. Very, very good original once again. And we are given some kazoo. Yes, there's kazoo on Everybody Knows It's Christmas, and it's awesome. Again, just having fun. It's what it's all about. Track 8, another original, Christmas Comes But Once a Year. Another great original composition. So now everything's starting to come together, gaining momentum. The original songs are getting better and better and better, and it doesn't stop on track 9, where I think the album peaks. Help Me Baby Jesus. Now, if you just take that by its title, you're probably thinking, oh my God, this is going to be such a serious, religious, solemn song. This song is actually funny as all get out. Chris Isaak singing about somebody stealing his nativity scene out of his front yard, including the extension cords. So when he sings Help Me Baby Jesus, he is singing to his nativity scene, Jesus. Help me baby Jesus, help me get you back home. And of course, everything turns out fine in the end. He gets his stolen nativity scene back. But it is a great, great song. This could end up being one of my favorite Christmas songs now of all time, along with his rendition of Malakaliki Maka. I mean, this is why I just love Chris Isaak so much. And I really want a new regular album from Chris Isaak. It has been a long time since we got one of those. But Help Me Baby Jesus, fantastic Christmas song. And then if you've got a dog, you'll probably appreciate track 10, another original. Dogs Love Christmas Too, where we actually hear Chris Isaak imitating a dog towards the end, which is just goofy, ridiculous, but again, you got to take it for what it is. It's just fun. Track 11, yet another original, Wrapping Presents for Myself, is great. Then we get another highlight, the final original song on track 12. I believe this was the first single he released on the streaming services. This is Almost Christmas. And this is all about him panicking because he procrastinated once again on buying presents. And boy, who out there cannot relate to that? And this is such a well-written, well-put-together song. Fantastic. Almost Christmas, the 12th track, is another Chris Isaak Christmas classic. Then finally, I think he felt obligated to close out the album, track 13, with a very heartfelt, genuine rendition of O Holy Night. So as you could tell, my enthusiasm has been growing here for this album as I've been reviewing it, as we've gone through track by track. I love it. Very happy with my Christmas album choice for 2022. I highly recommend you guys check out Chris Isaak's Everybody Knows It's Christmas. I think you'll put it in with your favorite rock and roll Christmas CDs, albums, along with me. And even with just a couple days left, if you don't get to it, keep it in mind for Christmas 2023. And we do have one song to review this week. It's not a Christmas song, but as I mentioned earlier here in this segment, it's Steel Panther. Steel Panther's 1987, the second release off their upcoming album, On the Prowl. Now, I have given you guys fair warning about Steel Panther. Steel Panther is raunchy. They are wrong on a lot of levels. But they are also fantastic in their love for 80s rock and roll. in 1987 is where they actually put together a tribute song of sorts for that era that they love so much, that their entire act is based upon. Their look, the sound of the songs that they do, it's all based on 80s rock and roll. So for them to come out with a tribute song called 1987 shouldn't surprise anybody. Now, is it still a little bit raunchy? As the kids say, not suitable for work? Yeah. Yeah, there's a couple lines in there that you probably don't want your grandmother hearing, especially when he's talking about David Coverdale and Tawny Kitaen. But of course, there's references to the great Judas Priest and the false hope at the time that they had that Dave and Eddie would get back together. There's even a little bit of a mention of Dokken in there. Poison, of course. Great line early on in the song about Poison, kind of feeding into the same fear I had when I bought Poison's first album, Look What the Cat Dragged In. And if you've seen the cover of that album, you can kind of formulate the worries a teenage boy would have given the pictures of the four band members on the cover. And Steel Panther sums it up in just a few lines perfectly in 1987. I'm not gonna quote the lines. Some might be offended. I'm trying to keep the Fortress of Rock out of controversy and as clean as possible. So I won't go there, but you can go there and listen to the song on your own. It is great. And again, back-to-back weeks, two great songs that pay homage to the music that we talk about here each and every week on The Fortress, the music we grew up with. Of course, last week was Ugly Kid Joe's Dead Friends Play. This week, Steel Panther's great 1987. So check that out, kids. Again, like I said, not quite as raunchy and controversial as Steel Panther's catalog can get, but still, couple little things in there that are going to upset the snowflakes in your life. Not quite PC, but if that kind of stuff doesn't bother you, like it doesn't bother me, you will enjoy 1987. All right, guys, that's going to do it for segment 2. Breakdown is over for this week. Of course, it's cold out. Wind chills well below zero where I'm at. Hopefully the weather's a little better where you are. But I think I can get the DeLorean fired up. I have to go out to the garage, see if I can get the DeLorean up to 1.21 gigawatts to take us back in history, in time, to look at some anniversaries and birthdays in rock and roll. Stay tuned. Another quick promo break coming up, and I will be right back. All right, now that we've looked at the current state of music in our breakdown segment, it is time to climb into the DeLorean and travel back in time to look back at moments in rock and roll history, birthdays, deaths, anniversaries of song and album releases. It is time for I Wanna Go Back, our tribute to Eddie Money. Stay tuned. And as always, we're on Spotify, Anchor, Apple, Stitcher, Castbox, Google, Pocket Cast, and Radio Public. Anywhere where you listen to your favorite podcasts. All right, we've got the DeLorean all revved up and ready to go to take us back in time. I strung some Christmas lights inside to make it feel a little bit more homey for us here in the holiday season. But of course, segment 3 on the Fortress of Rock is I Want to Go Back. As we look at anniversaries of classic album releases, birthdays, and moments in rock and roll history. Now, before we get into it, this is the point in time in every podcast where, number one, I like to let you know where you can find us. You've obviously found the Fortress somewhere, but you have options. The Fortress of Rock is available on Spotify, Anchor, Google, Radio Public, Pocket Casts, Apple, Overcast, Castbox, Stitcher, Amazon, and Audible. And of course, I am not taking full credit for each and every idea and tidbit and nugget that we talk about here on the Fortress, because my ideas have to come from somewhere. As brilliant and insightful as I think I am, I do need inspiration and I do need help. So I have 3 main sources for some of the ideas and the stories that we do each and every week here on the Fortress. UltimateClassicRock.com, This Day in Music.com, and of course, for your Van Halen news, check out the Van Halen News Desk, as I do pretty much each and every day. And then you can hear the snowplows go by. Oh boy, that's the fun of trying to tape a podcast in the middle of a blizzard. Okay, anniversaries first. Here, and I Want to Go Back. Of course, I Want to Go Back is our tribute to the great Eddie Money. Unfortunately, the 2 anniversaries I need to talk about are not really in the holiday spirit. They're a little bit depressing, so I apologize, but I can't control what happened on December the 23rd in rock and roll in the past. So first up, we go back to December the 23rd of 1985. As much as I hate to say it, we've gotten past it, we've gotten over it, but back in that era, starting on December the 23rd, 1985, going all the way through into the early 90s, we all know that hard rock and heavy metal went on trial for a while. Of course, we know about Tipper Gore and the PMRC and the labeling of hard rock and rap and hip-hop albums with the black and white parental advisory stickers. Well, one of the more infamous benchmarks of that awful, stupid era, and to this day, I still can't stand Tipper Gore and her witch hunt. And you guys who grew up along with me remember seeing the pictures of Dee Snider, Rob Halford, having to testify before Congress about their music and how they had to insist that they weren't devil worshippers and they weren't trying to incite drug use and murder. But this instance on December the 23rd, 1985, was one of the tipping points that helped empower an abject moron like Tipper Gore to proceed with her PMRC witch hunt. In Sparks, Nevada, two fans of Judas Priest went to a school parking lot and shot themselves. One died on the scene. The other survived but was horribly disfigured and eventually, 3 years later, did die. Arguments can be made that he died because of the injuries he sustained or because of the trauma which led to drug abuse and overdose. Now, how this feeds into the paranoia that Tipper Gore helped foster was that these two young men were listening to Judas Priest's album Stained Class over and over and over again, while they, of course, were drinking and smoking pot. I'm sure that didn't have anything to do with the certain frame of mind that they got into that led them to shoot themselves. But, of course, lawsuits were filed against Judas Priest. The claim was that there was a subliminal message in the song Better By You, Better Than Me, where Rob Halford was saying, do it, do it, do it. So as I mentioned, this ended up going to trial in 1990. Thank God the judge dismissed the lawsuit. Back then, we had some semblance of sanity in our government, in the judicial ranks. And you guys have heard me on occasion, not very often, but on occasion, say that I think that as great as the 80s were, when we got into the 90s, things started to fall apart culturally as a society for the United States, because things like this started to snowball. Ridiculous lawsuits started to pop up all over the place. Now, luckily for Judas Priest, this all happened before O.J. Simpson, before the McDonald's hot coffee stupidity. So sanity still was able to prevail here, and Judas Priest did not have to worry about, as tragic of a situation as this was, Judas Priest did not have to worry about being held responsible and paying out of their pockets for somebody else's tragic choices. Now, another 10 years down the road, of course, right now, this would have been probably a disaster for Judas Priest somehow. Maybe not. I don't know. We now allow so much more in terms of our pop culture, music, our TV shows, our movies, especially though the music and the TV stuff. We let more language go. We let more violence go. So maybe I'm off base here. But I still think blaming a record or a song for somebody's actions, especially when they are obviously under the influence of alcohol and drugs, this is where I wish there was a clearinghouse of sorts in the legal process where you could have a panel of 8 or 10 people in every state who could just look at these lawsuits and immediately say, this is absolutely ridiculous. We are not going to waste hundreds of thousands of dollars of the taxpayers' money to allow this to go through the court system because it's just pathetic and stupid. And I'm sorry, I know 2 young men died as a result of the events on December the 23rd, 1985, but it was their own choice and their own fault. It was not a subliminal message in a Judas Priest song. And the fact that that even got to a courtroom is amazing to me. It's beyond belief to me. Now we go back to December the 23rd of 1964, and as I mentioned, still a little bit negative here. Luckily, we're not talking about death, but this was a very important career-altering day for the Beach Boys. On this day in 1964, Brian Wilson, who many consider to be the creative genius behind the Beach Boys, had a nervous breakdown as the Beach Boys were traveling in a plane. This led him to leave the Beach Boys. And most of you know, it's been well documented over the decades, Brian Wilson's struggles with his mental health. So even a band, initially at least, as sunny and happy as the Beach Boys appeared to be, there were demons and everyday problems behind the scenes. Now, a rare rock and roll fact tied into this. I believe I knew this, but I think it's just one of those little nuggets of rock knowledge that kind of got pushed to the background because as I read this story and did some research on it, I'd forgotten completely that for a brief time, for live shows, after Brian Wilson had left the Beach Boys, Glenn Campbell took over with the Beach Boys. Now, eventually, Bruce Johnston ended up being the permanent replacement in the Beach Boys for Brian Wilson. And they had success after Brian Wilson left, of course. But it was just never quite the same for the Beach Boys. And I still think to this day, I know they're in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and I know there are a lot of people out there that do understand the value of the Beach Boys, but I still think they're a little bit overlooked even to this day in terms of their importance and their significance to rock and roll. Of course, coming up through the shadow of the British invasion, and the Beach Boys were the alternative to that, the American alternative. But the overwhelming wave of music coming in, the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, the Who, I still think to this day kind of diminishes a little bit unfairly the legacy of the Beach Boys. All right, let's move on to birthdays. turn that frown upside down. Let's look at a little more positivity, at least for a minute or two, because there is unfortunately some underlying darkness here in some of the birthdays that we're going to be looking at as well. Let's start off with December the 23rd of 1964. You can love him, you can hate him. All depends on how you really feel about two things: grunge and rock and roll stars jamming their political views down your throat. I, of course, still look at the grunge era as the last great era of rock and roll, where other people are still bitter about it because, and I get it, it took away, in some respects, the momentum from our beloved 80s hard rock, hair metal bands. I've come to peace with it. I've come to grips with it, come to terms with it. Now, beyond grunge is where I have my problems. I don't like emo. I don't like rap and hip hop. I don't like screamo metal. But there's other people that take it one step further and they dismiss grunge. I do not do that. I think the grunge era was utterly fantastic. So in that respect, I'm okay with this guy. The politics, I'm not. But at least he's not quite as insufferable as Billy Joe Armstrong of Green Day or Bruce Springsteen. So, 1 year older than me, 58 years old today. Happy birthday to one of the greatest singers of all time, Eddie Vedder of Pearl Jam. Of course, they got in first ballot Hall of Fame. I still have my issues with that. I love Pearl Jam, but I don't think they're that good. Where Kiss had to wait for decades. Van Halen, I don't believe, made it in on the first ballot. But somehow, Pearl Jam, they got in first time around. Yes, I'm a little bitter about it, but I still do acknowledge the greatness of Pearl Jam and the greatness of Eddie Vedder. December the 23rd, 1958. Dave Murray, guitarist for Iron Maiden, 64 years old today. Of course, Iron Maiden's still out there making new music. Last new album, double album, Senjutsu. They're still out there touring. Still viable. Still have a legion of devoted fans, still trying to get into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, as the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame just ignores heavy metal. Hopefully, eventually, Iron Maiden will get in. But happy birthday to Dave Murray. Okay, this is where it gets a little bit darker. I apologize again. I know the anniversaries in this segment were a little bit depressing. Not what I really wanted for the holiday season. But again, like I said earlier, I can't control what happened in history. So December the 23rd, 1951, Doug Stegmeyer was born. Who, might you ask, is Doug Stegmeyer? If you're a Billy Joel fan, you probably know who Doug Stegmeyer is. He played the bass in that awesome backing band Billy Joel had through his fantastic run in the late 70s and the early 80s, all through The Stranger, 52nd Street, Glass Houses, along with Liberty DeVito, of course, the drummer. That great band that Billy Joel had behind him. Doug Stegmeyer was the bass player in that band for Billy Joel. Now, unfortunately, Doug Stegmeyer committed suicide in 1995. But we have to acknowledge the fact that this is his birthday. And I always have respect and I always admire these guys who played behind the massive egos of some of these solo artists. And we grew to know who they were because they were so important to the sound of that solo artist, whether we're talking about Billy Joel, if you want to call out the Heartbreakers behind Tom Petty, I think they fit the bill. Of course, Ozzy Osbourne, all the great guitar players he had behind him throughout the years in his solo career. You get where I'm going here. We've got to acknowledge these players. Yeah, they got credit on the albums. Sometimes, like with Doug Stegmeyer, Billy Joel even put pictures of his band along with him in the liner notes and on the back covers of the albums. But I still don't think we give them quite enough credit for how important they have been to the history of rock and roll. So, happy birthday, Doug Stegmeyer, of course, no longer with us due to tragic circumstances, but it is what it is. Going back to December the 23rd, 1946, another name that you might not recognize. Do you know who Ray Tabano is? Most of us don't. I didn't really know who he was until, again, doing research for today's podcast episode. Ray Tabano was an original member of Aerosmith. Up until 1971, he was replaced, of course, by Brad Whitford. Now, we all know Brad Whitford, but you find this out more and more as you do more and more digging and more research on these bands. There are a lot of people out there who didn't get the credit, who don't get the acknowledgement for being part, at least initially, or at least briefly, in some of the greatest bands of all time. As I mentioned earlier with the Beach Boys, Brian Wilson, of course, leaving the Beach Boys due to mental health concerns, and Bruce Johnston eventually coming in to take his place. I'm pretty sure that when the Beach Boys went in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Bruce Johnston was excluded, was not part of the membership of the Beach Boys that was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in Cleveland, Ohio. Again, another example of how sometimes important figures in rock history don't get acknowledged. Ronnie James Dio, another one with Black Sabbath. To my knowledge, Ronnie James Dio is not in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in any way, shape, or form. But you would think Black Sabbath would have pulled him in when they went into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but no, he was not included. So again, a guy like Ray Tabano, people don't know, short tenure at the beginning of Aerosmith. Happy birthday. And then finally, going back to December the 23rd of 1940, and I'm going to butcher this name, and I apologize. I know who he is, but his name is really hard to pronounce, so bear with me here. He is also in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, by the way. Jorma Kaukonen, guitarist, vocalist for Jefferson Airplane from 66 to 72. Now, of course, that was I guess we could say along with the Beach Boys, to a certain extent, one of the great American rock bands that was juxtaposed next to the bands from the British invasion. Now, you guys know the bizarre history of Jefferson Airplane, not necessarily behind the scenes, but just all the personnel changes and the changes in their sound. Of course, Jefferson Airplane, as I mentioned, the classic era lineup, 1966 to 1972, including Jorma Kaukonen, they're all in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. But as we got to 1972, they split up, and Jorma went on to form Hot Tuna, which is a notable band from the 70s. Then, of course, Jefferson Airplane reconvened with some of the original members from the Jefferson Airplane lineup, became Jefferson Starship, maintained some success throughout the 70s as Jefferson Airplane. But then what happened was, of course, Marty Balin was the lead singer then, along, of course, with Grace Slick. Mickey Thomas came in. And then Jefferson Airplane started to pop up on MTV, or Jefferson Starship, I'm sorry. And then they changed their name from Jefferson Starship to just Starship. And you guys all know what happened then. They went ultra poppy, had the reviled. I personally don't hate the song, but a lot of people to this day make fun of it as a great example of bands that sold their soul to make it in the 80s, in the pastel video era of MTV. Of course, the song I'm talking about is We Built This City. So by then, Jefferson Airplane, Jefferson Starship had really wandered so far away from their initial roots. Of course, in the 60s, they were psychedelic. We know White Rabbit. It's just an interesting band to look through their history and see. And again, I'm not talking about any kind of tawdry drug use or crazy things they were doing behind the scenes. I'm just talking about the actual evolution of the band musically and personnel-wise. So, to wrap up, I want to go back. Happy birthday to Jorma Kaukonen. And that'll do it for I Want to Go Back. Driving the DeLorean back into the garage through these snow-covered, blizzard-strewn streets for one more week, but we'll do it again next Friday night. But we're not quite done yet. We've got to look ahead. We've looked behind, we've looked to the past, now we've got to look to the future. What are we going to talk about over the next few weeks here on the Fortress of Rock? Well, one more promo. I'll be right back, and we will discuss what's coming up on the Fortress. Well, we hope you enjoyed our trip back in time, looking back at the anniversaries, the classic moments in rock and roll history. But of course, the DeLorean works both ways. So now we have to move forward. The last segment here, as always, on the Fortress of Rock with me, the Maestro Kevin Crane. Spotify, Anchor, Apple, Stitcher, CastBox, Google, Pocket Casts, Radio Public. wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. It's all about the future. What's coming out here in the next month or two? What songs? What albums? What concert tours? That's why we call it Wrap It Up. Thanks to the fabulous Thunderbirds. Thanks to you for hanging out. Here comes our final segment. All right, everybody, time to wrap it up here. Your last Fortress of Rock episode before Christmas. Taping here December the 23rd, 2022. Looking ahead. We've talked about this over the last month or so. December, January, very barren times for new music. So it's also the time when a lot of podcasts, a lot of websites do their best of 2022 lists, and we are no exception. So next week on the Fortress of Rock, you will get my recap part 1 of 2022, where I will talk about my 5 best concerts of the year. We'll do that in the breakdown segment. We don't have any new albums to review. We don't have any concerts to review. Although I am starting to look at bending my rule a little bit when it comes to reviewing live albums, greatest hits albums, that type of thing. I'm fascinated by this new Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers Live at the Fillmore 1987 set that has come out. There's a 2 CD set and a 4 CD box set. A lot of cover songs, a lot of interesting things. So it's not just Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers playing their greatest hits. Looks a little bit more intriguing than that. So down the road here, to fill in the gaps until we get to the new music coming out in February, March, and April, we might end up taking a look at Live at the Fillmore in 1987, but that's not going to be for a while. That won't be until at least early 2023. I still haven't decided, am I going to listen to the 2 CD version, the 4 CD version? But as I said, part 1 of our year in review for 2022, best concerts of the year, will be coming next week. Also coming in the next few weeks, Quiet Riot, the Lost track we talked about last week, from the newly available album to stream, Rehab, which of course has been out for a couple decades now. But for the first time, it's available on streaming services. Rehab features the unreleased track, similar to Paris Blues, which we recently talked about, from The Doors, a track where Rudy Sarzo had to put everything together based on what he had. Of course, Kevin DuBrow has been gone for a while. Frankie Banali's been gone here for a little bit. So I Can't Hold On, lost track from Quiet Riot. And it's looking like that's going to be on the slate for next week as well. I promise you, I am trying. I am still working through these first 2 songs, Busted and In the Wind, from the Vi Gash project. And then a personal favorite of mine, talked about it last week, 3rd album coming out here in 2023, The Winery Dogs. Sheehan, Portnoy, Kotzen, I have the first two albums. They're great. The first single off their third album is Xanadu. We'll have that for you here on the Fortress in the next few weeks. And I know I wasn't the biggest fan in the world of the latest Nickelback album. There is a new Nickelback song out, not on the new album, Get Rollin'. This is a song inspired by, I don't think there's an actual soundtrack for this Apple TV Plus holiday movie. Will Ferrell's in it. Ryan Reynolds is in it. I believe it's called Spirited. So inspired by the Apple Plus movie Spirited, Nickelback has a new song called Unredeemable. Again, not on their new studio album that came out in November, Get Rollin'. We'll see. We'll see. I've listened to it once. It's more in that mid-tempo vein that we've been talking about with Nickelback, where they seem to be getting older. They've lost a little bit of their edge. So that's kind of what brought Get Rollin' down for me. Unredeemable on first listen seems like it's staying in the same vein. It is not the rude and crude bad boy rockers that I know and love from 15, 20 years ago, but we will review Unredeemable for you here on the Fortress coming up in the next few weeks. So that's going to do it. We are done on December the 23rd, 2022. One last time, I hope all of your loved ones, you, your family, your friends, have a safe, happy, and healthy holiday season. Merry Christmas. Of course, I will be back with you before New Year's, where I will again tell you to have a safe, happy, and healthy holiday season. But with the weather the way it is right now, supposed to stay bad here in the northeastern, midwestern portion of the country through at least Christmas Eve, possibly into Christmas morning. Be careful, be safe. I hope you've gotten to your destination. If you are traveling to see loved ones, if you were flying, the odds are you didn't. And I'm sorry for that. But you're never going to be able to beat Mother Nature. Do a Zoom chat, do a video call, do the best you can. Like I said, that's what I'm going to have to do this year for the first time ever with my daughter. Get through it. Don't let it get you down. If you feel yourself getting depressed, put on some rock and roll. Get your spirits up. Get your blood pumping. Get your fist pumping. That's what we're here for. That's what the music is here for. I'm the Maestro. Take care. Have a great Christmas, and I will talk to you next Friday night.